I'm really interested in comic strip. Okay. And it seems like the comic strip and intangible cultural heritage has nothing in common. But actually, I'm inspired by both fields. Okay. Today, I'm so glad to be here. I want to thank Joseph and also his staff for hosting us. We have a team of 10 people coming to do the performance as well as full demonstration. Something on my back. Yeah. I think I would very much like to share with you. A journey, my journey, okay, between the Chinese tradition and the contemporary arts. And I will start out with some of the my experimentation. Okay. I started out a project called Book of Ghosts series. For some of you who have studied Chinese theater history, you know that Book of Ghosts is a very important book in Yuan Dynasty. And then I started also working with the contemporary Kun program, basically with the Nanjing, the Kun opera troupe. And then from 2010 onward, I launched a project called Toki Project in Asia, which involved maybe I don't need a mic. Is it okay? You can all hear me well, right? I just need qigong to deliver my yeah. Can you turn it on? Okay. Yeah. And then I think the Toki project was launched in the World Expo in Shanghai. In fact, it was my collaboration with the Japanese, and I tried to get the no opera artists and the Kun opera artists together to share the stage. It was an interesting experimentation because this is launched in the Japan Pavilion, and they. Yeah. And I think after that, I really felt that it's so important to have cross-cultural exchange and collaboration. Because once when you do cross-cultural exchange and collaboration, you trigger a more critical way of looking at your own work and other people's work. When I say critical, that means you start thinking about how people see you and how you see other people. So I launched the Toki project in Asia in 2010, involving mainly the Japanese and the Chinese. But then it started expanding to Indonesians and other places. And then after that, I became very, very concerned about education. And I launched the Playground Education Lab, which what I did is I tried to get all the masters in all the traditional performing arts and contemporary arts to come and share with each other and also to share with the younger generation. The last project that I have over here is the Belt Road Cultural Platform, which we are still planning at this point. So I'll go briefly about the Book of Ghosts series. It's written in the Yuan Dynasty by Zung, the author, who is the first person who ever has written some biographies of performing artists of China. And so, but I'm not really interested in the contents, but I'm interested in the concept of why he did it and how he did it. Because in the Yuan Dynasty, performing artists are treated as the 10th grade, the social strata, the lowest, below the beggars and prostitutes. So I figured that he was eager to really do something about them. So he has about maybe 160 entries, and then he did another one, another 100 or so entries of various artists of that time. And of course, some of them are good in doing juggling, and some are good in doing threatening to some people. And so I'm really very interested in why we call this book he wrote called the Book of Ghosts. So I used that concept, and I started that in the 1996 actually, but I start further developing it in 2009. And in 2009, I involved artists, 4 masters. One is Sadono from Indonesia, and the second one is Hyderabadi from Bangkok, from Thailand. The third one is Kojing, he is here right now, and from Nanjing. And then the fourth one is Yi Baochun from Taipei. I invite 4 masters to come together, and then I invite 4 contemporary artists, also from Asia, and they are coming from Korea, from Thailand, and from Taiwan, and from Hong Kong. So 4 masters and 4 contemporary artists. And then I invited 4 scholars, and they are coming from Beijing, Tokyo, Bangkok, and I think the 4th one is from, let's see, I think it's from Taipei. So we have 12 people. So they were together intensively for about a week. And they were doing workshops and talks to each other. So it's sort of like a mini camp. And I think, to my surprise, the masters are so relaxed and so eager to share. And they are also willing to take classes from the contemporary artists. And the dialogue among all these people, these 12 people, is truly amazing. So let me show you a clip of the outcome of the project, the Book of Ghosts, of these 4 masters. most amazing thing about these artists are, they are, many of them are in their 60s and close to 70s, but they are still eager to do experimentation. So which is contrary to how we see, old masters only repeating what they do. The four artists, Kujing was trying to, Kujing is here right now. He impersonates, and it's the first time he impersonates on the stage. And Li Baochun, who is from Taiwan, and Li Baochun was actually a very prominent artist during Cultural Revolution, and he was very much supported by the Madame Mao. So after the Cultural Revolution, he just left China, and he was in Washington D.C. selling ice cream. And then later on, people just tell him that you should really come back. You should forget about all this political, background and history. So he returned and he went to Taiwan. And so in this particular experimentation, he was actually doing original performance about how he related to his father, who is also a very, very prominent and very famous Beijing opera performer, Li Shaochun. And then, of course, it's a very personal work, which usually very seldom seen on Beijing traditional opera, stage. So it's sort of like a come out of him. And then, of course, Pajavati is from Thailand, and she was one of the most, she's like, people call her the godmother of theater of Thailand. And she was trained in traditional classical Thai, and she built her own artist village, built her own theater, and later on, she built her own art school. So she has a school of about 100 young kids, full time. Okay, and this can only happen in Thailand. She's also really quite a character because her experience. She was married to an ambassador to I think some Thai ambassadors to Japan or somewhere else. But she herself was at one time on Broadway. So she has a wide range of crossover experience. And then Sadhano. Sadhano is right now still head of Jakarta Arts Institute. I think in Minnesota they are writing a book on him in the Walker Art Center, if you know about that center, which is a very important art institution in America. And he has been in the scene in Indonesia for a long time. It's very avant-garde, prominent arts figure. And I introduced them to each other, and I also introduced them to the youngsters, and introduced them to the scholars. So they all mingle and have a chat. And I always feel that mature artists need this kind of occasion as well. They are still growing and they still need new energy and new interaction. So that was the experience of Book of Gold series in 2009. So the next part I will talk and share with you is the contemporary art, contemporary Kun program, which actually started in 2005, but it continues now, okay, to 2017. The four work that I will show you here. The first work was done in Hong Kong and also in Singapore. Sears of Barren Hill was in Europe quite a bit. Stage Sisters was mainly in Hong Kong. And Flee by Night, which I hope you all come to the performance, which is on Friday night. So these are my experimentation with the Kun artist. And I must confess that, I'm not a I'm just very, very interested in Kun. I'm very interested in traditional performing arts. And in fact, it all started in about 2000, I think 2010. No, 2000. That was the first triennial Kun festival in China, happening in 2000 in Suzhou. And I was in Shanghai at that time. A friend of mine who is a very, very good composer, some of you might know, he came to visit me in Shanghai, and he said to me that he had never heard such a beautiful voice ever before in his life, and he said that he experienced that in Suzhou. So I asked him, well, if he's really that good, what is the person's name? And he said that he didn't know. And I said that, well, should you find out? And then he said that he would try to figure it out. It's an impersonator from Nanjing, and her name is Shi Xiaomei. So I asked Qi Xiaosong, I said that if you really think someone is really good, you should tell them. You should not just hold it up and tell me. Okay? And if you think that's really good, we should go and look her up. So I think he was pretty much, aroused, and so he picked up the phone and he started calling, and then he finally figured out how to trace this person, and then we said that let's go and call her and see if if we can pay her a visit. So in year 2000, we make a trip to Nanjing from Shanghai. At that time, the train takes about 4 hours. And now it takes about 1 hour, the speed train. So we went and visited Shi Xiaomei. She was very, very open and courteous. And I kept asking her that, wow, would you be interested to do something which is outside of your current range of your repertoire? And she said that, yeah, she could try. So what happened after that was that I worked with her on several work. The first work I worked with her was the Peony Pavilion, a section, but I used the Freudian way of looking at Peony Pavilion. So it's called In Search of Chinese Matter and Mind. And she impersonates the key character of the Peony Pavilion, the male character, and then I asked her to return to her original female dress and repeat her performance. And then we experiment about the music as well. Too bad I don't have a clip of that here, but that's my first experience with her. And then later I worked with her on the work stage systems. Because when I was in Suzhou again, I saw her performance in, I think that must be maybe the third triennial. She was performing on stage, and afterwards there's a lot of young old ladies rushing onto the stage to take pictures with her. And she said that all these are my colleagues during the time when she was learning Kun, but many of them left and no longer on stage. Some are accountant and some are housewife, some are retired. So I thought that was really interesting to see all these old ladies, all hugging each other and taking photographs. And so I said that let's do a work called the Stage Sisters. So she immediately reacted and said that yes, let's do it. So and what I did is I asked her whether we can, who she would recommend. So she recommended. First lady was Wu Jingfang, who is also from the Nanjing Kun opera of the same period, and she's a Dan, a female role. And then later on, Kong Aiping, who is also from Nanjing, and then from Xuzhou, Li Xuanmei. So I got all these ladies together, and we tried to have a dialogue between all these these divas, okay, and let them talk to each each other and talk about their growing up and about their history and also about how they relate to each other. And then I also invited some Hong Kong actors to intervene. So it became a very interesting exchange. The most important thing is I asked them to go back to when they were, say, 10 years old, when they were doing their first lesson in vocal. And I asked them to go back to the time when they do jamming. So it became a jamming session. So they were all trying out their vocal and become very, very musical. And I thought that was so interesting to see how they interact through just exercise. Okay? And that's the part that really amazed me most. And what I did also in the work is that each one of them can pick a part in Peony Pavilion and sing. So then I can see immediately the competition among them and how they relate to each other. Okay? But one other thing I did is I reversed the stage with the performance space to the audience space. So all the audience are sitting in the far end of the stage, watching them performing, while they were performing to an empty audience. So that was in the Hong Kong's Cultural Center Opera House. So people said to me that I'm doing a very extravagant performance because, you know, all the seats are empty, and so. But it was a very unique experience for me because I learned so much about an opera, about their growing up experience. That triggers me to do the Toki project as well, because I figured that going back to the training, how they would train, and whether the training is different from generation to generation, become a very amazing topic for me. So we show a small clipping of this stage system, okay? And I asked them about the Western music. So, and asked them, which composer they would be interested in. So, they know very little about Western music, but they love the Western costume. And they all want to wear high heel. So they will have 4-inch high heels, you know. I also learned a lot about some of the boundaries of being a traditional performing artist. So I did some small experimentation. For example, I said that let's have a red carpet on the center of the stage, but let's not step on it. Let's go around it. So they were trying to sort out how they relate to the boundaries. And I think the other thing is, of course, one of the performer, she was Kong Aiping. She said that, but can I touch it? I said, sure, you can touch it. So she lifted the red carpet up, and then let it go. Okay, I thought it was really great because I see that the performing artists, whether they are Kun or Western opera, they are the same. They are eager to also explore and experiment. You can hear some of the music which is from Norma and which they all love so much. So I said that using this opportunity to talk about cross-cultural collaboration, about how Western music at the time when Kun was first found in the Ming Dynasty. So this is one of the experimentation with all the ladies. Yeah. I'll show you another clip which is called the Outcast General. And this one was first collaborated with a Beijing opera performer from the Beijing Opera College, and then later on with Kun opera performer. And both performers that I've invited and chosen are in the Wuzheng, the martial arts area. But my experimentation at that time, because this was in 2005, I was mainly interested in how we look at history, and I used the video as a way of the technology to reflect whether history is truly recorded or not. So, so I did a lot of different kind of software capturing the movement and staying on the screen. And then you see different parts of the movement were documented, and they share the same screen. Okay. The Outcast General, of course, is another very prominent piece of classics of Chinese opera. It's a solo work, but it's mainly for martial arts. The male Wuzheng martial arts performer. We show the clip. Yeah, I was really interested in the new technology, how it's being used in contemporary theater. But I think that the important thing is how we comment on the technology instead of just using the technology to add color and texture. And I think in this particular work, I work with the software people about how we capture movement from one stage to another stage and sharing the same stage. The other experimentation I did in 2005 was I'm very interested in all the movement if they are not in their particular costumes, because usually costume covers the details of movement. So I asked a performer whether they can, put on the regular dress or a Western suit, or maybe go naked. And of course, this is still a taboo. But the young artist from Beijing, he actually did try that, because I want to see the muscles and how they are actually, presented. It's something that in 2005 was still a challenge to the young artist. But he did. So he tried that in Singapore. And unfortunately, people were just all talking about a naked male, okay? Instead of talking about, okay, you can see how the movements are related when you are wearing a costume and wearing a regular dress and then not wearing anything. But that was interesting experimentation in 2005. It's almost 12 years ago now. Okay, and I think the next work I will show you, which is much to do with cultural exchange. And this work is The Tears of Barren Hill, which is written by, it's written for Cheng Yanqiu, who is, who is equal to Mei Lanfang in the 30s, 20s and 30s and 40s. And he at that time decided he wanted to do this work, Tears of Barren Hill, as a reaction to the Japanese invasion. But in 1931 and 1932, after Mei Lanfang's success in the United States and also in Russia and Europe, Cheng Yanqiu also decided to go to the West. But then instead of doing performance, he said that he wanted to go to the West to study. So he was in Berlin and Zurich for, I think mainly in Berlin, for about 1 year. For a performing artist who gave up his career and just go to another culture is really, truly admirable. And he was learning whatever he could learn. So he picked up all kinds of documents, and he's visited hospitals, schools, railroad stations, the government house, and he kept everything on the record. And he also was particularly interested in Western training in theater. So in Berlin in 1931-32 was a very unique and a very unique time, in fact. And then he visited a cathedral, and then he said to his friend that, my goodness, this is the most amazing architecture. So he wanted to sing in the cathedral. So he sang the song Tears of Barren Hill, which was, was written for him prior to his visit to Europe. And that really inspired me about people, cross-cultural experience, how environment, how architecture, triggers him to actually want to share. And he sang, without any musical accompaniment, the song in the church. Okay, so I used that as to discuss about cross-cultural exchange challenges. He went back in 1933
because his musicians and his collaborators were all telling him that you must return, because otherwise we'll starve to death, because they need him. And he wrote to his wife and he said that nobody seems to care about my growth. Okay, I'm learning so much, and yet now I have to go back. There are 3 documents that I read from Cheng Yanqiu, which was very moving. One document was in 1933. He wrote down what he saw in the Western theater practice, Western education, theater education, and also the stage, backstage management, also anything related to performing arts. And he make a 19-point recommendation to Beijing Theater Circle upon his return to Beijing. And at that time, the people in Beijing said to him, "Who do you think you are? You were only away for 1 year and you are coming back as an expert." Okay. But he wasn't that offended. He was, his personality was that he just moved forward. And in 1949, he wrote another very long recommendation to the newly formed government. It was very detailed. It's not only about stage management, it's also about the future of traditional performing arts. And that is also a very interesting document. But of course, he was not really taken seriously by the government at that time. The government at that time was mainly concerned with what Mei Lanfang was thinking. And Mei Lanfang didn't say a word about traditional performing arts reform. So Mei Lanfang is much smarter, is a much better survivor in the political situation. But Cheng Yanqiu was just, he just moved forward. I forgot to tell you that they are all impersonator. Okay, so in other words, they play the women's role. In I think it was in the 1956 or 57, the last documents he wrote was about trying to apply to be a member of the Communist Party. And in that particular document, is full of denial of everything what he had done. And I kept thinking that all these 3 documents can really form a very important a review of the history of Chinese opera of that time. I think we have a clip of this, right? And I also used this work to discuss about the arts scene in Berlin at that time. There was a time, it was a pre-Hitler period, where a lot of things are happening. And I was, there are very important filmmakers and also musicians in Berlin at that time. The main character who play Cheng Yanqiu is Si Xiaomei. So I asked her to do this role, and she said that, but I only play male role. But I said, but you are a female. But this is like reversing the sexual role, okay, the gender role. So she often play male role. Now in this particular work, she play a male role who played the female role. So it's a bit confusing, but it's amazing that she did a very good job. The other thing is very famous of Cheng Yanqiu is her or his water sleeves. I don't know if you know about water sleeves. Maybe 唐心能不能帮忙我一下？给大家看看水袖好不好？It's his skill of water sleeves is totally amazing. But what I'm really interested in to see is that what's underneath the water sleeves, the hand movement or the energy. So in this particular work, we were showing all this water sleeves movement without the water sleeves. But yeah, I think you probably have seen water sleeves, right? No? Yeah, 我们就耍几下给大家看看。我刚才在谈陈彦秋的水袖 ，Yeah， 好啊。很好，我们脱掉它好不好？然后你再来一次。我刚才就说，我们看看这个手怎么动。谢谢唐鑫。